So I may not be your average Subaru WRX owner. I don't have a blue WRX with gold wheels. I don't vape and wear my hat backwards, and I don't say stage 2, bro. But I do own a WRX nonetheless, and I have for the last 7 years. And this is what my experience was renting a Model 3 Tesla on Turo. So believe it or not, way back when the Model 3 first came out, can't believe I'm saying way back, but it's been a while, I was actually considering buying one, and I went to my local Tesla dealership and I got all the finances worked out. I got everything figured up what I was gonna do in order to get this Model 3. So when I initially got to the Tesla dealership, the first thing I wanted to do was test drive the standard range Model 3. And after the test drive, I was a little less than enthusiastic about the car, and the salesman asked why. I told him it was too slow. He kind of laughed and was like, well, these are really quick cars. And I was like, not this one. And he kind of chuckled and he goes, well, what car are you coming from? I said, that Subaru out there. And I pointed to my WRX in the parking lot. And again, he kind of like gave me that side eye, kind of chuckled. I said, well, that car's modified. It's making like 400 horsepower. I was like, this car would totally get smoked by my Subaru. He kind of gave me like a, yeah, sure look, but my car totally would have smoked that thing. The standard range Model 3 is really not fast at all. And then I went and test drove the dual motor Model 3 and then the performance Model 3. And the dual motor and performance felt really good. And the performance, I even told him, I was like, yeah, this thing is quick. Like, this would be my Subaru. This is a quick car. I really like this car, but I didn't like the price tag. I ended up deciding against it. It was super expensive, and I decided not to pull the trigger on it and keep my Subaru. So back to the car in question, the Model 3 dual motor performance from Turo. I ended up renting this car out because I had a 14-hour road trip last Saturday and I didn't want to drive my WRX with my broken arm. I know I'd be on the highway and wouldn't really be having to shift gears all the time, but I wanted something that had either at least adaptive cruise control where it would keep lane, and thought, what better than the Tesla? So this car had full self-driving, autopilot, all the fun stuff. And this was my first time driving a Tesla for more than maybe 10-15 minutes. So I was excited to see what I actually thought of the car after a long-term trip. And I have a lot to say about it. So why don't we start off by talking about the things that I didn't like about the car, such as the steering. The steering was way too heavy and I didn't like it at all. I had the settings all the way down to the minimum weight steering. So in the menu, there's actually a setting for the steering. There's basically light, medium, heavy. I had it on the light setting and it was still too heavy for me. Driving down the highway, trying to merge in and out of lanes, the thing just felt like it was fighting me and didn't want to steer. I've had cars without power steering in them that turned easier than that car did on its lowest setting. But whenever I returned to the rental and I got back into my WRX, this thing turned like I was moving a bag of feathers or a pillow. It was so smooth and so soft to turn. I was just like, wow, that Tesla was really bad. So my second biggest complaint in the car was the lack of buttons. Now, I'm sure if you own one for a while, you probably get used to that. But coming from a car like this that's super mechanical and there's buttons for everything, having no buttons is really stressful. So I would try and do something as simple as change the climate control, and I'm going down the road and thank God the car was driving itself, because I'm going down the road like this, scrolling through the menus, trying to find, you know, what I'm looking for. And it was definitely interesting. I didn't like it, and clean up to the end of the 14-hour trip, I was still frustrated with the lack of buttons. I would definitely have to grow on that after a while. So here in just a moment, we'll go over what it cost me to rent the car and what it cost me to charge the car on the trip. But I want to talk about my third biggest issue, which was the range. I had bad range anxiety, and I know all new Tesla owners have that, and even some existing Tesla owners, especially on a long-term trip like a 14-hour road trip. Basically, I was driving 7 hours to North Carolina and turning around driving 7 hours back. And when you get in the car and you plug in your destination and it pops up all the superchargers that you're going to stop at, it is very calming, because you see, oh, I'll get there with 20%, oh, I'll get here with 15%, oh, I'll get here with 25%, and the car already knows and it's all mapped out, and it's very reassuring. I think Tesla did a really good job with that. However, on the return trip, I was super stressed. The reason being, I only had 24 hours with my rental before I would get charged an additional $188 a day. That is what it cost me to rent out this car. Basically, the rental was $75, and until Turo charges their fees and the protection plan, yada, 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 $188. And I did not want to get charged that for a second day just for being a few minutes late. So I basically was on a time crunch trying to get home, and the car was mapping out these superchargers, and each one, the first one was like only 15 minutes. Then the second one was 40 minutes. And I was like, I do not have 40 minutes to spare right now. And then the final one, I was only going to get there with like 5% charge. I was like, why is the car mapping me out to a place where I'm only going to get a 5% charge? So I got to the first 2 charge stations and I ended up charging the car, and I was super stressed out. I was running low on time, and so I picked up the pace. So I'm speeding a little bit, and as I'm on my way back, I can see that 5% now turn to a 4%, turn to a 3%, and I was like, I'm gonna get to this charger at 3%, 2%, 1% if I'm lucky, but every like couple of minutes it's going down a percentage. So I slowed way down, got into the slow lane, I'm going the exact speed limit, trying to keep that charge up because I'm scared that I'm not gonna make it to this charging station. So I'm on my phone, I'm on the Tesla touchscreen trying to find a closer charging station that I won't end up getting there at 2-3%. So I did end up finding one that was a little bit closer. I stopped there, charged the car, and I did make it back to a final charge point before dropping off the car, fully charged it. I ended up showing up to the guy's house 20 minutes late, but I had messaged him, let him know, and it was all good. But it was still a very stressful situation. However, if I owned the Tesla and I was going on a 14-hour road trip and I didn't have a time crunch because I didn't have to be somewhere at a certain time, I didn't have to return the car at a certain time, I don't think the charging would have stressed me out nearly as much as it did knowing that I had to have the car back at a specific time to return it. Now, I did have a lot of fun with the car. And coming from someone who is a car guy and loves his internal combustion engines and loves his turbo noises and exhaust sounds, I had a lot of fun with the car. I did a couple of 0 to 60 launches. I did some 60 to 100 pulls on the highway, and that car was super quick and super fun. I even got to race a Kia Stinger, and we went side by side, and I was super, super happy for the guy in the Kia Stinger because, you know me, I still talk shit on Teslas. So coming from the car world, all of us internal combustion guys want our cars to be able to beat a Tesla because all the Tesla owners are just kind of like got their nose up in the air talking about how quick their cars are. And I have personally, not in this WRX, but my 2020 WRX that was STI swapped, making 403 wheel horsepower, I actually beat the car that I rented, not the same car, but I beat a Tesla Model 3 Performance in that car. Best feeling ever. I also beat a P85D Model S in that car. I beat a couple of standard range Model 3s in that car. Anytime a Tesla would pull up next to me at a red light and they'd look over and start laughing, I would be like, okay, fine. I'd put it in the first gear, I'd hit the launch control, and off we went. And I raced quite a bit of Teslas in my Subarus, but watching that Kia Stinger going door to door with the Model 3 Performance was a lot of fun. I was so happy for that guy for almost beating me. Like I think he was starting to pull, but we ran out of room. We had stopped at some supercharger stations, and one of them was across from a Chevy dealership. And we were actually laying back in the car, and while the car was charging, there's a megaphone feature. And we were on the megaphone feature, we were laid back so no one could see that there was anyone in the car, and we were just talking mad shit. There was a guy outside of the dealership standing there next to a Chevy Corvette, and we're like, hey you know, you in the blue shirt, what are you looking at? And I said something about, oh yeah, stand next to that slow Corvette, this Tesla will smoke that Corvette or whatever. And next thing you know, his coworkers are out and they're all looking, and it was funny. It was a fun time. We were messing around with like all the different things. You know, they have like a beat studio. They have like the video games. They have all this crazy stuff on the screen. You'll never be bored when you're charging the car. There's always something to mess with. I definitely adjusted my seat quite a few times on the trip, but overall, it was very comfortable. For a 14-hour ride, I found myself uncomfortable for about maybe 5 minutes of it. I also probably only drove the car for about half of the trip. The other half, the car was on autopilot, and it did astonishingly well. I had 1 or 2 instances where somebody kind of started merging over into the lane, and the car freaked out and made me take control. It was interesting watching the car behave, drive itself, avoid traffic and obstacles, and it was definitely interesting. There was a couple times it lost the lines in the road and kind of like was about to swerve off the road, and I had to grab it quick. So not perfect, but it is very good. For 2024, I can't believe technology is where it is right now with these self-driving cars. I was very impressed. But I also enjoyed driving the car, so I did take control quite a bit to go around slowpokes. When you need to whip around somebody, you're gone. It was a fun experience. As far as charging goes, the cost of charging was pretty expensive, more than I thought it would be, but definitely cheaper than gas still. So if I would have taken this car, filling up with 93 premium gas, I probably would have got down there on 1 tank of fuel, and I probably would have got back on 1 tank of fuel. Both tanks of fuel costing about $65 with premium gasoline, equaling out to about $130. The fuel, or the charging for the Tesla ended up costing me $108 for every single supercharger stop from start to finish. So not much cheaper than gas, but cheaper nonetheless. So one of the other things about charging that was pretty neat was it takes you to new places. The car actually had me stop at a pretty cool mall. Like, it was a really big mall. There was all kinds of cool restaurants there that I'd never even heard of before. And had I not been on a time crunch, I could have went in there, walked around the mall, explored, went and got dinner, all while the car was charging, and walked back out to the car. But because of the time crunch, I basically just let the car charge up to the minimum it needed to continue the trip, and I was on my way. I really enjoyed the sound quality in that car, and I mean the sound system. It was super cool, and actually I went to the settings and turned up the bass at one point, and when you turned up the bass all the way, it actually, instead of saying a number, it said brrr. But it was awesome. The sound quality in that car was super, super good. And I've definitely ridden in some really nice Audis and stuff. That sound quality was right up there with those cars. It was a very good experience as far as sound quality goes. Moral of the story is I loved driving that Tesla Model 3. I felt at home when I got back to my WRX, and I was actually very happy getting back to my WRX and driving my WRX back from where I rented the car back to my house. But I found myself missing the Tesla a few hours later. So overall, I would give that Tesla like a 7.5, 8 out of 10. It was a very fun car. It was very quick, very comfortable, good sound quality. It was a great car for a road trip. It was very spacious. Overall, I would love to have a car like that. I would definitely rent one if I go on another road trip like that. But next time, I'll probably do it if I'm going on vacation and not turning around, rushing back home and dropping off the rental car. But that's going to be it for today's video, guys. Let me know in the comments what you guys think about Tesla. If you own one, what you think about WRXs. I don't know. We'll talk at you in the comments section, and I'll see you guys in the next video.